Internet, what do the Lesu 3, the Jabeni 3, and the 3 Amigos all have in common? If you answered none of them are in my top 10 for this video, congrats! You nailed it. Now, if you said they had 3 people in their trio, you would technically be correct, but that's not what I was looking for. But that does actually raise a good point before I get to number 10. I think there are a good amount of powerful trios to emerge over the span of a bajillion seasons now. Years ago, I made a video talking about the 5 most powerful duos, and the funny part about that is before I went to make this video about trios, I had drafted up another version of who I believed were the 5 most powerful duos as of today, because I was interested in talking about that subject. However, I did so without realizing that I had already made that video back in 2023, and my list then was only partially the same as it was today in 2025, because I had a few more distinctions as to what I thought constituted an actual duo. I don't know if that's saying something about my ability to remember the videos I've made at this point, but it's been a long time on YouTube now, almost 8 years, and look, I say all this as a prelude to my top 10 here, because my two top fives for duos weren't identical, despite only making that list like 2 years ago. The criteria for how I defined a duo was slightly different, as well as how much power I thought they had in the game. My perspective is very subjective. What determines power? What determines why one trio is above another? And what even determines if a group of 3 people is actually a trio? Well, with this top 10, I'm gonna see if I can answer these questions, and then maybe revisit it in like 2027 and have a totally different list for you. At number 10, I have the trio of Jeremy, Spencer, and Tasha from Season 31, Cambodia, Second Chance. I think these 3 are a pretty strong group that all played rather well as far as physical, social, and strategic games go. Although we did see 2 of them get 0 votes at the final Tribal Council, so that definitely knocks a bit of their games, but then Jeremy is right there with a perfect game on display every jury vote, and that is tough to ignore. This trio controlled a lot of the post-merge, alongside a few other players too, such as Steven and Kimmy. They also had Savage on their side at one point, as well as Joe. The main reason I don't have them higher than number 10, and honestly almost didn't even include them in my top 10 in the first place, is because they weren't really a trio for a good chunk of this season. They ended strong, they left a strong impression, we all remember them, but for a while Spencer wasn't even on the same tribe as both Jeremy and Tasha. At the swap, Spencer was a potential boot for Jeremy's alliance. The real trio was Jeremy, Steven, and Kimmy, and it was only many episodes later, after Spencer blindsided Steven, that he began to wedge his way into an eventual power position. The trios that are higher on my list almost all established themselves sooner in the game, controlled more of the game, and went really far together in the game. This trio on Cambodia definitely peaked with how far they went. I mean, you can't do better than the final 3. And while Jeremy was the strongest player of this season, controlled several boots nearly all on his own, and did much of the heavy lifting to earn that title of sole survivor, the other 2 members in the trio do bring it down a bit. I also am trying not to have any random final 3 being called a trio because they happen to make it to the final 3. I don't think that's the case here, but the overall strength of this trio's bond isn't as strong or powerful as the other 9 above them.
To make it to the end, it's crazy. It's crazy.
To making an alliance, sticking to it, us 3 at the end battling it out.
Beautiful. Cheers.
Congratulations. I took the personal change in me and used it to move from the bottom to the top.
I miss him so much. I didn't leave this long for nothing. Oh man, can't lose this. This is right there. It's so close. I surrounded myself with the right people at the right time. And even up to the end, I feel really good.
At number 9, I have the trio from Season 2, the Australian Outback, with Tina, Colby, and Keith. Quite an iconic trio, if I do say so myself. I mean, we have Keith bringing up the rear with the record for highest average days played with 41. Get on his level. And he's the weakest link of the bunch. Okay, but the biggest reason I have them higher is because they didn't really start as a trio until later in the pre-merge, and while they did control pretty much the entire rest of this season from that point onward, it was quite dicey at times, and I can't say Keith really contributed all that much in the first place, or the third place. Keith was the goat who was dragged along. He was included, he was loyal to the other two, and I would say they were a trio. After all, they didn't take out Mitchell as anything but that. But when I compare their level of dominance to the rest of the field, I do feel a little bit underwhelmed when I'm talking about their power level. Tina and Colby did dictate the boot order in the post-merge. They took out Jerry and Amber at the right time, were able to curry favor with the opposing tribe, who were all just sitting ducks. And while I do think this season was their trios to lose, the overall game just wasn't too complex, and their dominance wasn't as pronounced when compared to the next 8. And look, I'm not trying to come for the Keith stands out there. These 3, they're all icons, so who cares?
I think the 3 of us are very emotionally attached to each other right now. And if the word love comes out of your mouth, and that's the emotion you're feeling at that time, you know, you'd have to love some of these people to put up with them in the context that we have for 42 days.
This morning is home stretch. There's only 3 of us left, and we have 3 days.
I think that I have evolved, that who I started out as in this game is not who I've ended up as. I have developed more into a strategist, and it worked to get me from 16 to 3.
At number 8, I have another heavy hitter that I think many of you would say could vie for the number 1 spot on this list. When I was putting this list together as a rough draft, they were much higher, and then they unfortunately just kept going down a notch. From season 15 China, I have the trio of Todd, Courtney, and Amanda, who also all reached the final 3 and were in a similar spot to the previous trio I just talked about. And again, I just want to say, if you know my taste in who I love as a player on this show, Todd, Courtney, and Amanda absolutely fit the bill, so I'm really doing my best to remove some bias here. These 3 entered the merge and gained a foothold on the numbers. They proceeded to whittle away at the opposing tribe every other episode, all while blindsiding members of their own tribe who weren't really inside the inner core of this alliance. Because, you know, you only need 3 to reach the jury at this point, and neither James nor Jean Robert fit the bill. But this trio were quite pronounced. The blindside of James at the final 7 and his 2 idols is one of the hallmark moments of this show. The strategic depth of both Todd and Amanda is some of the best out there. And then, of course, you had Courtney, who was, well, I can't even say she was happy to be there. Courtney does kind of hold this trio back a bit when I'm talking about most powerful. They grew frustrated with her at times. She mostly had to be convinced to follow their lead, and the unity between these 3 was always just a little bit off despite their dominance. They also didn't form right away when they hit the beach, or the swamp in this case. The original trio of this tribe was Todd, Amanda, and Aaron. Aaron was considered the leader of the tribe and a founding member of the trio, and then he was picked off after a lousy swap twist occurred. The trio lost a member early and had to recuperate. They picked up Courtney as a second string and, well, off they went. But they had to navigate a winding maze of twists and turns to be the final 3, and with a handful of impressive, flashy moves to boot, I have decided to give them a bump up from 10th and 9th to be 8th on the list.
I can't believe that sometime in the next 24 hours, I get to use a Q-tip.
China's been a crazy experience.
Cheers to the final 3, girls. Can you guys believe that we made it this far? No. The 3 of us, really.
I'm so happy it's you guys too. Now I'm getting sappy too.
This is for 38 days of suffering in the jungles of China. And to day 39, we're the final 3.
The 7th most powerful trio is stacked with a few more strong players that I think easily explain how they managed to get this high. Basically going to be coming down to name recognition. From season 10, Palau, I have the trio of Tom, Katie, and Ian, a group that also had one of the messiest endgames of all time. These 3 worked together throughout most of the season, and yet when it came down to that final hurdle, particularly the final 4 and final 3, they totally fell apart and barely made it to the final 3 at all. First, Katie turned on Ian, then Ian turned on Tom, and then Tom turned on Ian. And then Ian threw in the towel and jumped off that buoy at the 11th hour in the final challenge. Oh boy, yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. But to get to that messy ending, these 3 held a good bit of power. They came together once their tribe was decided by a schoolyard pick in the premiere, and they basically intended to go to the final 5 together with two other players, Greg and Jen. 5 of us to the end, and they stuck together the entire pre-merge. Their tribe won every challenge up to the final 9, and once the merge hit, which was really just Stephanie joining the ranks, the journey began to get a bit bumpier. Katie considered joining a women's alliance against Tom and Ian, and then later had to get strong-armed by Ian to flip with them to blindside Greg and Jen. Katie was reluctant, but ultimately acquiesced, and then the endgame began, where this final 3 was all the focus. I think it's easy to say why they're in this top 7. They controlled Karor for like 75% of the game, and Karor was the dominant tribe of the entire season. It's really only in that last 25% where they began to slip, but still, they all made it to the final 3 in the end, and given their road to get here was pretty smooth sailing, that's good enough for me.
You know, it's a treacherous game, and you tell lies or whatever you got to do to get ahead. You know when the other guy is going to stand by you, and he should know that you'll stand by him. Am I the fool being played here that's risking $1 million to go toe-to-toe with this guy just out of honor, and I might not have gotten that in return?
I intended on taking Tom and Katie to the final 3, or working with Tom and Katie to get to the final 3. That was my intention.
We're playing a game. We're playing a game. We thought we were all playing the game together.
Yeah.
I thought that was the plan. We take this to the final 3.
The bottom line is, I wanted Katie and Tom in the final 3, and we got here.
Number 6 is yet another trio who all reached the final 3, which is kind of amusing because I can say that not all of the trios in my top 5 managed to pull that off, despite being higher in my ranking. But hey, it's not just about the destination, but the journey too. And number 6 is going to the trio from season 27, Blood vs. Water. It's Tyson, Jervis, and Monica. The Coconut Bandits have arrived. And Monica. She's here for Monica. So this group is a bit random, but there's no denying how much power they held throughout this season, particularly with Tyson and Jervis. They did a lot of maneuvering and scrambling to get to this final 3. They had a majority alliance in the pre-merge with the other returning players like Aris and Tina, and alongside Monica, decided who would get voted out first from the tribe. And kind of like Karor, they didn't really have to go to tribal all that much in the pre-merge, but even if they did, they were the ones calling the shots. And so once the post-merge hits, they become a lot more pronounced. Tyson and Jervis have a ton of options and decide to finally betray King Aris to instead rope in a few of the newbie players. And along the way, they maintain the relationship with Monica. She was always there, but she grew even more dependent on the trio as her core once her husband, Brad Culpepper, was taken out right before the merge. And even though I think people will agree that Tyson and Jervis as his wingman were very powerful and controlled a lot of the game, for me, it is Monica that helps be a tiebreaker for why she is this high in my top 10. Monica's role was always the pivotal swing vote for the opposition. She was diplomatic and passive, but also very friendly, and this led the other players to appeal to her more than anyone else. Really, the narrative for this trio was, will Monica join the opposition or not? But she never did, a testament to her loyalty to the trio. It was a running narrative that Monica needed to flip on Tyson and Jervis, but the reality was that she had a third spot punched in that final 3. Not Sierra or Hayden or anyone else, and she knew it. And so while she led on the opposition, even giving them hope at times, it didn't matter. Monica basically kept the opposition distracted, and they just never got a foothold to overthrow the trio. And then you have Tyson being the power player with the most win equity, pulling in Hayden and Sierra, and getting Laura back on their side when she returned from Redemption Island. Jervis was his wingman. There's always going to be a wingman in these trios, and while he did hold a bit less power, it didn't change the overall level of dominance this group had over the season.
We did it.
We did.
Woohoo! We're good friends for the
39 days.
rest of our lives.
This is actually gonna happen. I'm gonna find myself in the final tribal council.
It's just amazing. The final 3, the helpmate and the mom, found herself and became Monica again.
I have come full circle. I'm one of the original players to ever play this game, and after 13 years, I come back and I ended up in the finals.
And you might be noticing where we are in this video and how much time is left. Those are my number 10 through number 6 of the most powerful trios in Survivor. Because, quite frankly, I've already talked a lot and I need to put a little bit more time into my top 5, figure out the right order, so I'm going to be saving them for next week. And also because I'm a tease. But kind of like waiting for the next episode of Survivor next week, this window gives me the opportunity to ask you, what do you think about these picks? And who do you think are the top 5? Who would you put in your top 5? Given the beginning of this video, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the players I just talked about might be there, which is very valid. I think that there's a lot of ways you can slice this topic, which is what makes it so interesting for me and why I want to make it 2 videos. Regardless though, thank you to my patrons for all your support in bolstering this throuple, and thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget your seats right over there on the jury on your way out, and I will see you in the next one where I will almost certainly rustle some feathers with my top 5.
Sierra, I'm telling you right now, I've never betrayed you. These guys have both written your name down.
Sierra, you can be number 4 all day long. You can come with us.
Sierra, what did he say when he came back to camp after Caleb went home? Who's getting his vote?
Sierra, it was
got
to
riled
rustle
up.
feathers. It was to rile Jerv up.
We talked about
Ruffle
that.
feathers. You said rustle feathers.
Rustle, R-U-S-T-L-E, rustling leaves. You can also
Oh,
rustle
okay.
feathers.